Professor Anne O'Connell, my colleague at the Melbourne Law School, has just published this important book, which is now going to be the landmark book in the field on the topic of taxation of charities and not-for-profits in Australia. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined by a lineup of luminaries to speak to aspects of this book, and I'll invite them to do that in just a moment, and then I'll invite Anne to say something in response. First, I'll ask David Bradbury to say a few words. David works at the OECD, but many will remember him in his role as Assistant Treasurer, the Commonwealth of Australia, at a moment of great importance for the charity sector and law and policy reform. When David has finished, I'll ask him to hand to John Emerson, who is well known to many of you for a long and distinguished career in practice at Herbert Smith Freehills, advising the sector. Then I'll ask Professor Miles McGregor-Lowndes to say a few words. Miles is, of course, a giant of the field and one of the international leading voices on the study of not-for-profits and the law. And then I'll invite Anne to reply. Then we'll take a pause and turn our focus to Fiona. So David Bradbury, if I could ask you to kick off with a few words about Anne's book.
Well, thanks very much, Matthew, and it's great to be able to join you. I was having a little bit of trouble connecting, so I hope that the transmission is all fine. But I should say good evening to you all, although it is a very early good morning here, a dark, cold morning. I'm joining you from the 15th arrondissement in Paris. And I guess here in Paris, we've certainly experienced the ups and downs, perhaps more downs of the year that's just been. But for my part, I really think this is just a wonderful way for us to come together and to bring what has been a very difficult year to an end in quite a celebratory way. And it's been my pleasure to have known Anne O'Connell for a number of years, both as a colleague professionally, but also in a personal capacity, and I would certainly consider Anne to be a good friend. But I first became connected with Anne through her work in the not-for-profit sector tax concessions working group. And as Minister at the time, I had a report delivered to me in the final stages of the then Gillard and almost Rudd government again. And at that point, there was some very, very good recommendations. I think Parliament was no longer sitting. There was no opportunity to bring any legislation forward. And that was a great shame, personally, for me to not be able to do that. But as Matthew said, I was very fortunate to be in the role when many other interesting things, such as the statutory definition and the establishment of the ACNC occurred. So no complaints from me. But that's how I came to New Anne, and I always found her to be incredibly insightful, very professional. And then some years after that, after the good voters of the electorate of Lindsay, my then constituency decided that it was time for me to move on and to take up a role in Paris at the OECD. I did that, and as the head of the Tax Policy and Statistics Division here, I had the opportunity to continue to work in tax. And I have to say, when I arrived, there was not a lot of focus on not-for-profit and charity taxation issues. But one of the early assignments that I managed to secure for the team was to advise the Colombian government, and in particular, Mauricio Cardenas, who was the finance minister at the time, on a major tax reform that Colombia was considering. And a key part of that reform was to reform the not-for-profit sector. Now, at that point, we needed to bring in someone with the expertise to be able to help us with that work, and Anne was the person that did that. And not only did she come on board and join us here in Paris for the duration of that particular project, but she certainly became a very important and key member of our team in the tax policy team at the OECD. Even more recently, I had the privilege of working closely with Anne on the most recent piece of work that we've done in this area, which has been on taxation and philanthropy. So Anne has not only distinguished herself as someone that knows just a little bit about this stuff in Australia, she really has become someone that I think internationally is recognised for her knowledge. And that's one point that I want to make. There's lots of very good things that will be said about the book that we're launching today, that Anne's launching. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate her on what is really the culmination of decades of work. She's done an outstanding job. This is going to be an important resource for so many people in the sector. But I really just wanted to take the opportunity to say that it will not only be important to people in Australia, but it will be important to many people beyond Australia, New Zealand, right across the world. And that's because in the time I've occupied the current role that I'm in, I've seen how much respect there is for the work that is done in Australia, for the regime that has been established, for all of its faults, and no system is perfect. But there is a recognition that the way things are done in Australia is something worthy of being an experience that others want to follow closely. Now, to Anne, congratulations on this outstanding piece of work. I'm not going to pretend that I've read it all. It only arrived a couple of days ago, but I've certainly read a number of the chapters. Some of the introductory chapters. I read chapter 4 in great detail, which is about the history of the sector and tax concessions, which I thought was fascinating. And I think that this is going to be an ideal resource for so many people, whether they're practitioners, whether they are people who are required to occasionally dip into the area, or whether they're people associated with the sector that may not have a tax or legal background that want to ensure that they're complying with their obligations and doing what is right as they go about doing the really important work that they're engaged in. Just a final word, and that is to say that I know that there have been many other people involved in supporting Anne through this project. Fiona, congratulations to you for your contribution as well, and for others. But I think that in times like this, where we really have seen so many of the organisations, the service providers, the people that have sustained charities and not-for-profits really making an absolutely essential contribution to community life. And times such as these, such as a pandemic, and there are many other significant events that Anne catalogues in her book. But in moments like this, we are reminded of how important this sector is. And it is really, really gratifying, I think, to see that someone like Anne, who has dedicated so much of her professional time to this cause, now has the ability to bring this all together into a single resource that I know will not only support all of those people, but is an important recognition of the good work that they all do on a daily basis. So thanks very much for the opportunity to be there with you remotely. And congratulations, Anne. Very proud to see you deliver such an important contribution to literature in the sector. And I look forward to continuing to enjoy your friendship for many years into the future. And I'll now hand over to John Emerson.
Hello, everyone, and David, it's lovely to see you again. It really is. It's a good period when you were there here. I also have known Anne for many years, and I consider her a good friend. And we've had pretty much monthly catch-ups for the last few years, which has been lovely. Thank you, Anne. I think this book will fill a significant gap in the existing tax publications. It will even be a one-stop shop for many readers, which is just so helpful. A lot of you would have seen the interview a couple of weeks ago between Jennifer Petrini and the former Chief Justice of Victoria, Marilyn Warren. And in that interview, the former Chief Justice noted that the taxation law relating to charities was confused and puzzling. She got that right. And that a comprehensive knowledge, a good blend of both taxation law and charity law was needed to understand it. And I think this book has that good blend. It is most comprehensive, and you go further, you comment upon your understanding of the policy reasons for particular outcomes, and happily you also comment on the lack of policy in many cases. The book is also extremely well, or contains an enormous amount of citations. I counted them. There are more than 4,500 citations, and that goes to the credit of a lot of hard work for you in preparing the book, and also its future usefulness. People will be able to dig down into particular issues to examine them in more detail if necessary. Like David, I think this will have wide readership, from people wanting to understand the whole of the area to practitioners or judges, High Court, wanting to dig into the detail on a particular issue. For the first time in my life, I think I could now calculate an FBT rebate. That my whole career I have avoided doing that. And your decision to write this book was very ambitious. The amazing result comes from your extensive knowledge and experience in the area and a lot of hard work. And I really hope you're proud of yourself. You should be tremendously proud. Thank you. Miles, I think it's you.
Thanks, John. Listen, I endorse and everything that David and John has said about the book. You should be very, very proud. And we and the non-profit sector and the ATO and the ACNC, the regulators, should be very grateful that you've taken enormous, meticulous care in writing the book. You've poured your heart and soul into just about every page, and there's nothing missing. And what's most important to understand charity and non-profit taxation is the historical context, because as you've shown in your academic work, much of this was idiosyncratic knee-jerk reaction by politicians with a pet peeve or a pet favourite issue. And unless you understand that policy and the dynamics of the power of various charitable sectors in massaging legislation and what eventually happened, you've got no idea of, no sense of what really was going on to shape the legislation to get where we had to. And unless you understand that, it really is quite quizzical and a mere jumble. And even with that knowledge, sometimes it can be quizzical and a mere jumble. But you've done a wonderful job of smoothing it out in a logical, clear, concise, excellently and accurately referenced, which is really appropriate. And you go from A to mutuality. I mean, few of us have delved into the issues of mutuality outside the club industry, and it's much neglected. The Indigenous stuff by Fiona is tremendous, and it really is the complete package. So it really will fill a gap in the market. It should be at every serious practitioner's bookcase, handy. It will save hours and hours and produce better advice to the sector. And I think it'll be a great reference by thinking practitioners and executives and CFOs in the larger charities now. It will become a handbook. Of course, the task is to keep it current and up to date, and they just keep on flowing with amendments. But it is just to get to this base, it is just tremendous. You've put your heart and soul. It is just so difficult, as a few of us have done, have written sole, standalone books of a technical nature, and it is a long, long journey that you've got to sustain your passion for the project. So, well done. Everybody go out. Anne shared with me lots of chapters during the journey, so I can really say I've read it several times, but I often get the drafts mixed up with the final version, so I've still got to go and look at the final version. So, Anne, as I've been working with Paul Paxton Hall in trying to get some tax advice out to his clients, it's been a constant reference, and it works. The answers there and the leads are all there. So it's been a great check as you've produced the chapters to, as I do try to attempt to do some work to look at it. And I endorse what John has said. This will become a practitioner's Bible, as well as for all and sundry. So it's marvellous work, well done, and you should be very proud of the result. I would say, be cheeky enough to say, if anybody does find or has some differences of opinion, I think Anne would welcome hearing about them, because there will be other additions, and we as a learning community can only improve the product as we support authors. So can I say, don't be backwards in coming forwards with any critiques or technical issues or odd things that you've found through practice. Share them so that we can make the publication even better next time around. Well done, Anne.
Oh, can everybody hear me? Look, thanks for all of those comments. I'm tempted to say they're the sorts of comments that you would normally only expect a mother to make, but I'll just take them because I want to enjoy this moment when I've got lots of friends and family around, and I've come to the end of this particular project. You won't be surprised to hear I've got lots of people to thank. Matthew, my co-investor on the Australian Research Council project, and law school colleague, thank you so much for organising this launch. And because it's virtual, we've been able to have wonderful people like Miles up in Brisbane and David in Paris. So thank you very much for your organisation. David, I'm very grateful to. It's been noted that he was the Assistant Treasurer in 2012, 2013, and he really shepherded through the introduction of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission and the Charities Act, two really significant pieces of the regulatory framework in the not-for-profit sector. And then, as he's indicated, he provided a wonderful opportunity to work at the OECD. It was obviously a bit of a hardship moving to Paris, but well worth the effort. And just recently, I've been really excited to see that the OECD got on board in relation to taxation and philanthropy, and has produced a report that's got wonderful data in it about best practice in a range of countries, about 40, I think. Thank you also to John, again, a wonderful friend and guide. In his role as the former partner at Freehills, he really established the model for large law firms to undertake pro bono work for the sector. And really that was his whole practice, was working for the sector, not all pro bono work. But he did come along to Allen's at one stage and try and persuade them that I could do the same there, but we didn't have all that much success. I won't be able to repay the debt to Miles. He is a wonderful researcher. He knows more about the sector than anybody. He established the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Non-Profit Studies many, many years ago. And he has read all of the chapters. And I can definitely say that they are better. Each of the chapters is better for his comments. Other people who helped me with the book, I wanted to recognise Dr. Joyce Chow, who was a research fellow extraordinaire on our Research Council project, and her insights helped to give credibility to our project. Cassie O'Regan, a wonderful JD student at Melbourne Law School, again read every chapter and made sure that all of those, how many was it, John, 4,000 plus footnotes were compliant, and also raised other issues that she thought I might need to have a look at. I had some other researchers, Paula Castillo and Miranda Webster, I've noted in the book, and I'm very grateful to all of those people. My dear friend Fiona Martin kindly contributed a chapter to the book on Indigenous charities. And I think the inclusion of that chapter makes the book a sort of a richer resource. It's wonderful to have the benefit of her expertise. And I know Ian's going to talk more about Fiona. Although she is retiring from UNSW, she's not going anywhere. And she'll be around doing her wonderful research for many years to come. I should also mention Alan Myers, who is currently Chancellor of the University of Melbourne. He's a wonderful philanthropist, and he provided a scholarship in 2018 that allowed me to spend time over the Northern Summer break in the library at Oxford University, which is when I started writing this. I obviously started doing the research well before that, but 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to sit down uninterrupted and start writing. I've mentioned other people in the book, but I just wanted to single out Susan Woodward, because I think her research in relation to regulation of not-for-profit entities in 2003 was really groundbreaking, and probably the forerunner to us having as an independent regulator. David mentioned other countries are quite jealous of that. And I mentioned Sue because she is head of not-for-profit law at Justice Connect. And I'm happy to say that all of the royalties from the sale of this book are going to not-for-profit law. And that means that I can, in all good conscience, encourage you to buy copies of the book, perhaps two, to make sure that there's lots of royalties flowing to not-for-profit law. I hope I haven't left anybody out. I just want to finish off by thanking LexisNexis. They took a punt on publishing a new book, and I know it's a costly exercise. They took a punt in a very difficult economic environment. So I'd like to thank Lyra and her team. And generally, I do hope this is a bestseller, not because I will benefit from it, but because I think a lot of people shy away from tax. They think it's rightly that it's very hard, and hopefully this will be a good complement to the other wonderful literature that exists in relation to charity law generally. So I think I then hand over to Ian.
Before we do, let's give Anne a round of applause one more time.